Welcome. My name is Tim Stewart. I'm president at Visual Decisions, and we're here today to talk about robust manufacturing performance in an age of disruptions. I probably don't need to explain to anybody that the last 2 years have seen far more disruptions than probably any time in manufacturing history. Whether it's rapid changes in demand, both up and down, or just shifting from one product to another. An example of that is within the food and beverage industry, how things get packaged and distributed between restaurant and consumer demand has gone back and forth radically as different waves of COVID have hit the populace. Supply chain issues and disruptions have been completely super prevalent over the past year, 2 years. And what we're seeing are record numbers of people changing jobs, both leaving the job that they're in, you're retiring, absenteeism because of sickness or other reasons. And so it's a very, very dynamic environment for business these days. And so if we look at, what can be done by businesses to address or at least mitigate each one of these different common disruptions and still, perform well as a business, we can take a look at some of those in turn. So when we're looking at demand disruptions and how demand is fluctuating and so forth, especially if you're in a make to stock kind of environment, you've probably had lots of inventory sitting around that isn't getting used, and you've run out of inventory of things that have, has had demand shift to it. And so the traditional means of forecasting where, we look at 3 years of history and, how those trends roll out throughout the year, and we use that historical analysis to forecast what's going to happen this year and so forth, just isn't as relevant as it used to be. And so if we look at, how we go about forecasting these days, being able to, utilize different methods of forecasting rather than just doing the historical analysis and, projection, looking at rapid access to point of sale data, incorporation of additional data streams into the forecast. So for instance, how does demand shift for different products, as COVID is going up and down? And if we look at that as a causal factor for the analysis, and we look at leading indicators for COVID waves, such as the amount of COVID found in wastewater streams and so forth. Those are things that we never would have thought of incorporating into a demand forecast for products in the past, but are extremely relevant for being able to forecast what is going to happen with demand for our products here in 2022. And then, being able to somewhat do demand shaping as well in terms of knowing how different sales or promotions and so forth impact the demand, and being able to shape the demand to try to sell what we have on the shelves instead of what people may request without us trying to influence that demand. And then inventory planning itself, having that balance between efficiency and robust coverage. We have long been in the business. I've been selling supply chain software since 1995 and doing consulting in that space. And we've always preached, keep the, absolute minimum amount that you think you need in order to cover your demand variability, your supply variability, to achieve the service levels that you want. And we have much more variability these days on both the demand side and the supply side. And so if you want to keep those same levels of service that you've had in the past, it actually calls for increasing the inventory. And so those are things that, it's just a fact of life these days. And, you do the best that you can, and if you can improve your forecast and improve your supply chain reliability that we'll talk about next, then you don't have to increase it that much. But there needs to be a realistic look at how much additional inventory should be in place in order to cover the additional variability that we see in the market. And then one way to mitigate how much you have to carry is to go through more frequent planning cycles. And so if you're only doing a monthly sales and operations planning process where you figure out how much inventory you want to stage and so forth, you should really consider moving that to a weekly process if you can, and even more frequently if possible. Because the more frequently that you do that, the less you're going to be caught off guard for how much inventory should be in place in different locations throughout the country and so forth. From a manufacturing supply chain perspective, there needs to be a strong focus on agility as well as efficiency, and we'll talk more about that in a little while. But the more that you can do to reduce lead times, minimize the time that you have from one product run to that same product run. So if you go through cycles where you do products A and then B and then C and then D and then back to A, the more frequently that you can run through that cycle, the more frequently you can refill the finished goods inventory and the less you have to carry. So the smaller manufacturing lots, as small a manufacturing lot as you can run, the better off you're going to be. And so that agility, that minimization of changeovers and setup times, even if you're changing over more frequently, leading to some inefficiency, it might be beneficial in the long run based on the market conditions that we're seeing today. Anything that you can do to shorten supply chains, source from near your point of consumption, is going to be better off, because any time that you're going through any mode of traffic these days, any node point, we have backups within the supply chain. Obviously, at the entry points into the country, we see tremendous backups still, and it doesn't seem like that's going to change in the near term. And so if you can source locally, you're certainly better off. And again, even from a cost point of view, if it's a little bit more costly, at least you have product. And then utilize postponement strategies where possible or where logical, I guess. Again, based on how distribution networks are changing, in this environment and so forth, and where point of consumption is happening, if you can wait as long as you can to package the product so that it can, be what the customers are looking for at the point of consumption that they're looking for it, you're going to be better off, and you will have to carry less inventory. So that allows you to get things through your supply chain to the point where you have the finished good, and then you just need to package it appropriate to the demand. So it's not always possible to do that. Certainly in the food and beverage example that I gave earlier, you're not going to keep frozen food laying around for too often before you get it packaged up. But in more durable situations, product situations, that is definitely a possibility. So those are different ways to, kind of mitigate that demand disruption. And again, a lot of that is, some of that is focused on the forecasting up front and being able to track that demand more closely. But then a lot of it is on the supply side and being able to make your supply chain and your manufacturing processes more agile and more closely follow those rapid demand swings. Next, we take a kind of a closer look at some of those supply disruptions and how we can mitigate those. As we're looking at the supply chain, communication and visibility to our suppliers is absolutely critical. And so, being able to have a better relationship with our suppliers and to be able to communicate with them more effectively is extremely critical. A lot of them are facing the same supply issues, getting things in from overseas that our companies are facing as well. And so being able to talk to them and understand where their issues lie and being able to project more effectively than just what the due date is, when those materials will realistically arrive, is going to be beneficial to your planning efforts as well. And then, being able to get near continuous updates from the vendors and being able to be tied into that essentially overall planning process for the supply chain, as opposed to each company, just kind of protecting their own information. So anything that you can do to, further those relationships with your suppliers and being able to do that is going to be beneficial. From a planning perspective, again, a lot of companies are still doing weekly planning on the supply chain. If you can get to daily planning or even hourly planning, and at least maybe not creating a full plan from scratch on a daily or hourly basis, but being able to replan based on how things are changing, based on visibility to those supplies, based on visibility within your own factories and so forth, is going to be beneficial. And if you can incorporate all of the different constraints, or at least as many as possible, including labor and who's available to work in a given day and so forth, those are going to be things that are going to help you understand what is possible to be delivered, and to minimize the amount of disruption that, or minimize the impact on performance that these disruptions are causing. And then from an agility point of view, again, being able to do rapid changes. Can't emphasize that enough. So being able to build what can be built that is in demand, and what you have materials for is going to be critical. Being able to shorten those supply lines. Think about it from kind of a military campaign perspective, where you've got to protect your lines of supply in order to win the battles and so forth. Being able to have those short supply lines, being able to multi-source where possible that you may not have before. Even if it costs a little bit extra, and you've been trying to minimize suppliers in the past, maybe look at having those extra suppliers within the supply chain, so that you have that additional agility for when one supplier can't be able to provide everything that you need. And then also thinking through strategic raw material reserves and so forth, so that you can keep your plants operating and being able to build some things, even when certain supply disruptions occur. And so being able to have that visibility, being able to have that capability within your organization to on the fly adapt and respond to things that are happening. And a lot of that is the visibility, having the full knowledge of where everything is at within the factory, who's there that day, what your machines are currently set up for, being able to incorporate all of that and generate plans, and being able to replan rapidly is going to be very important. And then mitigating personnel disruptions as well. There's issues around absenteeism, retirement, and churn these days. And from an absenteeism, whether it's people being out with COVID, or whether it's people that have been exposed and have to be quarantined, or whether it's just the mindset these days of people not wanting to come in when they have a cold because they might have COVID and so forth. So how can we deal with the absenteeism? Well, cross-training is certainly very important. Utilizing standard work, and not only having the work well defined, but having ways that someone that is going to be brand new to that process, that's going to have to step in and essentially do that job without training, being able to have that standard work be very visible, so that they can have those step-by-step instructions as they're new to that process, so that it can get done even with a brand new person that hasn't done the work before. And then maybe to instead of running at the edge of efficiency, plan to overstaff a little bit, knowing that most or fair percentage of the time those people will not be showing up for work because you have the absenteeism. And then if you do have overstaffing a given day, how can you utilize that work those people most effectively, whether it's running the process more quickly than you would normally do so that you can get ahead a little bit, or whether it's being able to do continuous improvement with those people, do additional training so that if you have extra people in a given day, you can cross train some of those extra people to do additional tasks that they may not have been qualified for in the past. Take that opportunity to cross train your people. So that is another way that you can look to go about this. From a retirement point of view, being able to do knowledge capture before the people leave the building is absolutely critical. Often our people that have been in that process for 20 years are the ones that know how to run it the best, and our standard work may not be caught up to the way that those people know how to run that process. And it may not just be how things go when everything is running smoothly, but being able to capture their knowledge about what to do when different exceptions occur, and being able to capture that through something like some of the augmented reality tools that are out there today, where you can very rapidly kind of democratize this knowledge capture, so that anyone that has a pair of glasses and can wear those as they do their job, and basically just take the video and annotate things as they go and explain things as they go, is going to help you fundamentally build up that knowledge base within your organization. And then from a churn perspective, that kind of comes from, there's two ways to address that. First of all, you can retain your people and, recruit people more effectively. And then being able to do more with less from an efficiency point of view. So from a retention and recruiting point of view, I've talked quite a bit last year, and I'm going to talk quite a bit this year with my partner, Sandalwood Engineering and Ergonomics, about human-centered manufacturing, human-centered design. And when you have that human-centered process, people are much more comfortable. They're much less likely to, jump to another company and so forth, where it may not be as comfortable a working situation. If we can lower other costs through efficiency so that we can raise pay, that can certainly help our retention and so forth. And then, having that flexibility so that people see that they're not just coming in and doing the same thing every single day, but they have, different things that they're trained for. They get to do different tasks and so forth. That again, helps that human-centered, point of view and so forth, that makes work more enjoyable for people when they're not just an automaton doing the same thing all the time. And then, from an efficiency point of view, the vast majority of my webinars have, covered how to do more with less, how to eliminate waste from the process and so forth, how to combine our breadth of knowledge on lean manufacturing with smart manufacturing to really supercharge that effort and be able to remove so much more waste from the process than we can do with lean alone. So those are some of the high level things that we can do to minimize a lot of these disruptions. And a lot of what I've talked about focuses on agility and being able to make our organizations, our supply chains, as well as our own manufacturing processes more agile in response to what's happening in the marketplace. And so when we look at agility versus efficiency, the way that I'm defining agility is to maximize responsiveness to both the market dynamics and unexpected events. So a lot of these disruptions that we're talking about, and being able to run our organization in the face of all of those different disruptions. And efficiency is how do you run with the minimum possible cost of production, distribution, et cetera. And so traditionally there's a bit of a trade-off between those, because some of the things that you want to put in place for agility may come at the cost of efficiency. So some of those things that we've talked about, like putting extra inventory in place or overstaffing a little bit in order to have people, there, being able to cross-train them, have the additional resources in place on a given day so that if some people don't show up, you have enough workers to run the process and so forth. And so some of those different kind of shock absorbers or excess capacities that you can put in place incorporate, inventory, whether it's raw material, work in process, or finished goods, excess capacity from a machine or from a labor perspective, financial, cash reserves or credit that allow you to, respond, in a given situation. And also, from a time perspective, being able to quote additional lead time to our customers to give ourselves a chance to respond, when these different things occur. Some of these things that we've traditionally tried to absolutely minimize from an efficiency point of view, to kind of balance the agility and being able to respond to the market dynamics and the different disruptions that are happening, we may want to increase these a little bit. But that trade-off between the agility and the efficiency is something that we would like to not have to make, as opposed to just trying to pick a place on this curve. If we think of the trade-off between agility and efficiency, what we would like to do instead is to actually shift the curve. So what can we do as a business that we can become more efficient and more agile at the same time? And so that's what I'll talk about next, is how to shift that curve to improve both. And when we look at how to shift that curve, some of the things that we can do to improve agility through systems, through people, through processes, making sure that we have alignment between our source, make, and deliver processes, making sure that manufacturing is always in sync with the supply chain. And so again, that comes down to not only being able to do that scheduling and so forth, to incorporate all of those different constraints, but that we have good adherence to that schedule from our manufacturing processes and from our purchasing organization on what materials we're bringing in. And then how quickly and effectively can we replan, in the face of those internal and external disruptions. From my people perspective, how do I engage my people to become problem solvers? How do I get my people to be more flexible, more agile, capable of doing more different tasks as an individual and so forth? And from a process perspective, how do I use lean or operational excellence processes to become more responsive to customer demand? And how do I remove monuments in my process to improve flexibility? So a monument from a lean perspective is something that can't be moved. So, if you're relaying out the factory, if you've got a support beam that, has to be in place in order to hold up the roof, well, that's a monument. That's something that you have to plan around. And those things can not only be physical in nature, but they can be, process-based, they can be skills-based for your people and so forth. And so what can we do to remove the monuments in our organizations and in our business so that we have that flexibility that we need to become more agile? And then from an efficiency point of view, I'm looking for any value leaks that are occurring within my plants. And those could be throughput-based, they could be quality-based, cost-based delivery, and then value leaks within my supply chain, whether it's supplier quality, material cost, supplier lead time, et cetera. And so these are the different conversations at the functional and the plant level that have to take place in order to improve both that agility and the efficiency. And what we're trying to build up to is kind of this agile and efficient organization. And so, the first thing here is kind of the sun in the middle of this solar system is, customer centricity, being able to be as close as we can to our customers and understand how they're going to react to the different situations that are happening within the marketplace. And if we can understand their mindset, that helps us to anticipate what's going to happen in different scenarios, and we can kind of war game that out ourselves and so forth and be prepared in advance for different things that will occur. But then, from an operations and supply chain perspective, which is, my typical primary focus with my customers, certainly, we need to have rapid visibility to disruptions as they occur, whether that's personnel or supply chain or demand or whatever it might be. We need to have immediate visibility when these things are happening, and not just for one person, but throughout the entire organization. We need to be, able to replan on a continuous basis so that whatever the art of the possible is right now, we are able to adapt and adjust to that and kind of turn so that we can optimize based on what we can do as opposed to what we would like to be able to do but can't. Eliminating monuments so that we have that maximum flexibility within our organization. Again, from a skills perspective, from a physical perspective, from product perspective, et cetera, process, and then balancing out that efficiency and agility. From a leadership and culture point of view, being able to have the consistent strategy and fluid tactics in place and so forth, alignment and focus throughout the organization, maybe through a policy deployment or host encounter process or something similar to that. Clearly communicating, throughout the organization and having that culture that, people are, in this together and so forth. Having an organization structure and adaptability with as few barriers between different teams as possible, keeping that communication and the information flowing so that, again, we don't keep visibility to these disruptions in one segment of the operation, but everybody understands what the challenges are and is doing what they can to overcome those. And then having some fluidity with the reporting structure and so forth so that we can adapt to the different circumstances as they occur. From a product innovation and development perspective, being able to have our engineering team tied in with both manufacturing as well as out to the customers and visibility to some of the telematics from our products if possible and so forth, so that we can see how they're being used in the field and be able to improve the cycles of improvement, improve the speed with which we improve our products and so forth, and eliminating the waste in that process so that as we're doing the engineering, we're already looking at how that's going to be made within manufacturing, what are the supply chain requirements and so forth, and then being able to get that into the field and so forth. To do all of this, what we have to do, especially from an operations perspective, is to combine the smart factory and the lean factory. I've talked a lot about different lean perspective, operational excellence perspectives and so forth. What I don't want to lose sight of is the industry 4.0 capabilities that are out there with things like augmented reality, the Internet of Things, machine learning and artificial intelligence and so forth, that can provide so many additional capabilities to the organization, especially when you combine it with the lean process, so that you can get not only the enhanced visibility, but those enhanced planning capabilities and really identifying and removing the waste and the monuments within your organizations. One of those key things is to know, am I winning or losing today? And that question has become more complex in the face of these different disruptions. And so, in the past, how I've measured myself from, winning and losing perspective, just going off of standard hours or something like that may not be as applicable in such a dynamic work environment. And so, how can I really get a good sense of whether I'm doing the right things within my part of the organization to say if I'm winning or losing in a given day, based on the market dynamics, based on the supply chain disruptions and personnel issues and so forth. And so part of what we can do is put a digital management operating system in place, and being able to capture the visibility of what's happening on the shop floor, what's happening within the supply chain, what's happening from a demand perspective, and have that be visible to everybody in the organization for the things that they need to see, and being able to see, where I'm good and where it needs attention, and being able to see this in either real time or near real time across, things like safety, quality, delivery, cost, inventory, manpower, environmental, et cetera, and knowing, how to respond to that. So not only seeing for each of these individual metrics, whether I'm good, for that metric, whether I'm meeting my targets and so forth, but having these targets be adaptable based on the current situation, and then being able to drill down into this where I'm not meeting that new target, and being able to understand, what are the things that need to be done in order to course correct. In addition to that, again, flexibility is going to be absolutely key, as we progress into this world that we're in, and being able to eliminate barriers to change throughout the organizations and not just on the machines. So, a lot of these things that we talk about with SMED and everything else on, individual machines, we need to apply to processes as a whole, and look at, apply these same kinds of tools to, the overall process, so that we can become much more flexible as an organization to move from one task to another task and still have it be as effective as possible. But, from the machines themselves, so that we can move from one product to another, a lot of the things that we can do from a Industry 4.0 perspective can really help with the SMED tasks that we've done in the past. And so, for instance, with task tracking, we could do spaghetti mapping with RFID or video analysis or other tools, as opposed to somebody standing there and following someone around and mapping it out. We can do comparative analysis for setups between different operators, between products, and so forth, to see, not only just how long is this setup supposed to take, but how long does it actually take every single time, and how much variability do we have in that, and what are the different causes for variability, and how do we eliminate those? Visibility of, where manufacturing is at, so that we can do the advanced kitting, and being able to adjust that based on how dynamic this environment is going to be. And then, having that standard work in place, not just for running the process itself, but for changing over, and being able to identify, where people are deviating from that standard work. I've talked about replanning a number of times, and how you can quickly adjust to deviations from the plan. And as we've seen, things don't always go according to plan. And so, rather than having a plan that's in place for a month from an SOP perspective, or a week from a capacity planning perspective, and so forth, the key is to create that environment where you not only detect the deviations from the plan, but you can make those very rapid adjustments to the plan, even if you don't go through a full planning cycle. Being able to understand what are the changes that I need to make based on who's here today, or what materials are in the plant, and being able to adjust accordingly. And then, that is absolutely critical, just from all of the different things that we've talked about already. Being able to change on the fly is going to make me much more successful in adapting to all of these different things that are happening, all of these different disruptions that are occurring, and being able to still run my business fairly efficiently, even in the face of all of those different disruptions. And the real-time analytics, the machine learning capabilities, the artificial intelligence, some of the new planning capabilities and so forth that are coming out in the market these days. These are all different things that are going to help us, achieve these different goals. So that's it for today. I ran a few minutes over my projected half hour here. From an upcoming webinar schedule perspective, here are the different topics that I have for the next few weeks. Next week, I'm going to be looking at automatic data mining for process improvement. I'm going to talk on the 19th about improving those setup times and doing a much deeper dive in how to accomplish that. Things like cache-to-cache cycle time, the visual factory in 2022, taking a deep dive into the 8D problem solving process, implementing Industry 4.0 the right way from, how do I go about selecting and, really implementing things to be as successful as possible. And then the one on the 23rd is going to be a lot of fun. I talked to, the person in charge of continuous improvement at UTC, a few years ago, and he said that, if we were only able to maintain the gains that we had with, each different initiative that we did, every Kaizen that we ran, we could just drive the truck past the factory and everything would spontaneously assemble and fly out into the truck. But what happens is the continuous improvement teams will, look at a process, they'll improve it, performance will, get better for a while. And then when the team shifts their focus to something else, that performance degrades or erodes over time, and you fight that entropy to the point where, it's running just as poorly as it was before. And so we're going to talk about how we can utilize some of these tools to fight that performance entropy. So with that, I want to thank everybody for your attention this morning. And if you have questions, please reach out to me at tim@visualdecisions.com or, give me a call there. And I look forward to talking to you all in the future. Thank you very much.